Geographically, Libya is a peculiar entity. Everyone thinks of it as a relatively constrained place, but it's not. Most of the population, over 90% of it, live very close to the shore, but the coastline is stretched out 1,800 kilometers. So you've got basically a long, thin ribbon of a state. In the era before oil, this made development as we now know it basically a non-option. So the country has always been split between west and east with a big gap in the middle. Even in the modern day, it wasn't until the 90s that the Libyans really started to get the first road network, and by network I really mean one road going on the coast from east to west. Add in the fact that it's mostly desert and it's a very thin population, 6.5 million people. As such, the idea of an independent Libya is something that is unique to the 20th and 21st centuries in the collapse of colonialism. Libya is a moderately sized oil producer. Its total production is about 1.8 million barrels per day under normal circumstances. It exports approximately 1.5 million barrels per day of that, most of which goes to Europe. The problem Libya faces is twofold. First, they only have about 6.5 million people, so they've never been able to generate a significant educational institution at home. So they've never been able to train the massive technocrats and engineers that are necessary to maintain an oil industry of this size. As such, they're pretty much dependent upon foreigners to come in, sink in the cash, drill the wells, maintain production, and ultimately get the exports out. The National Oil Company does maintain a sizable presence, but it's mostly an issue of resource nationalism more than any sort of technical competence. So without the foreigners, production pretty much dries up. Over the course of the last 72 hours, every major oil company that operates there has announced a steady drawdown of their staff. Several have evacuated completely, and based on the best information available to date, over half of production is already completely offline, and we expect the most to go offline within the next 48 hours. The second problem is that not all of Libya's energy is in one place. It's actually sequestered between two very separate basins, one in the west, which exports from just west of Tripoli, and one in the east, which exports from a number of different facilities in the Gulf of Sidra, and then one even almost on the Egyptian border. There is, for all practical purposes, a military split in the country right now between the east and the west. You have about 2/3 of the population in the west and about 1/3 in the east, separated by about 600 kilometers of mostly empty desert. You have about 2/3 of the oil in the east and about 1/3 of the oil in the west. So you've got this split in the country between the population, between the energy. There's no overlap between the two. And so Gaddafi's problem is that the majority of the oil income is dependent upon security in the half of the country that right now he can't control. Internationally, there's two things to keep in mind with Libya's energy. First of all, it's mostly light sweet crude, which is in demand pretty much everywhere in the world. So as Libyan crude goes offline, you should expect a pretty dramatic price increase in oil overall, because this is some of the best stuff that's out there. Second, there's one country that is far more vulnerable to anything that goes wrong in Libya than any of the others, and that is Italy and Italy's state-linked energy company, Eni. Right now, roughly 15 to 20% of their total global portfolio in terms of oil production is in Libya. And if it's not offline now, it will be very, very soon. Also, all of the natural gas that Libya exports via pipe goes to Italy, goes to Eni. So this is a company that's seen its portfolio gutted, and it's seen its country probably a little annoyed that it's not a little bit better diversified. The question in Stratfor's mind at this point is, what degree has independent political control and military control consolidated in the east? We know that Benghazi, that the second center of population in the east, has basically declared independence from Tripoli. But if they can spread up and down the coast to control all of the oil export facilities, and if they can consolidate that, then they have a very good chance of breaking away from Gaddafi and maybe even starving it of money, because that's the majority of the oil revenues. So if Benghazi can expand down into the Gulf of Sidra, down to the city of Sirte, they've got a very good shot of independence at the least, or maybe even overturning Gaddafi at the most. But if they can't do that, Gaddafi in time will be able to pressure them.